Hello, and welcome to the Science Bloggers Podcast. I'm your host, David Latchman. Yes, the show is currently off season, so what you're listening to is a bonus episode. I hope you enjoyed this extra special, extra content. My guest today is Allison Coffin. She's a scientist at Washington State University, where she studies how we lose our hearing in response to loud sounds and certain types of drugs. She's also looking at how to develop drugs or other therapies to prevent hearing loss or regenerate hearing after loss has already occurred. She also runs the science communication nonprofit, Science Talk. I talked to her about her research at Washington State University and her goals for Science Talk. Hi, Allison. So how are you?
Doing well, thanks. How are you today?
I'm fine. So what's the weather like?
It is beautiful and sunny here in the Portland metro area, unusual for this time of year, and I am staring at Mount St. Helens from my office window. No idea what to do if it erupts, but as long as it stays dormant, it's a beautiful view.
Well, let's hope it stays dormant, and it's good to have nice weather.
It is!
So why don't we start by telling the listeners a little something about yourself?
Sure. Are you looking for something about myself in terms of my research or science communication or background? Give me a little hint here.
Well, you can talk about your research and then we can go into science communication. How does that sound?
That sounds good. All right. So my current research focuses on cellular mechanisms of hearing loss. So we're really interested in how do we lose our hearing in response to things like loud noise or damaging drugs, and how can we then develop drugs or other therapies to prevent hearing loss or to regenerate hearing once hearing loss has already occurred. And I do this research at Washington State University on our Vancouver, Washington campus, which for your listeners that hear Vancouver and think Canada, yes, there is a Vancouver in Canada, but there is also a Vancouver in Washington State. We are near Portland, Oregon. As far as my science communication interests, that really stems out of my own science communication experience. When I was a graduate student, I joined a Toastmasters club just to work on my own science communication skills. And through that, went from improving my communication skills to teaching communication workshops for others, first for business professionals, and then starting to merge my intersected interests of science and communication to teach science communication workshops. And that's led to kind of my second full-time unpaid job now, which is running Science Talk, which is a science communication nonprofit, as well as working on science communication initiatives at Washington State University.
Okay, that sounds cool. So let's talk about the research. You're investigating hearing loss and you're looking at ways in which we can fix it. Is that correct?
It is. Either prevent it or fix it. Right. So there are a couple of different things. For somebody that is at risk for hearing loss but hasn't lost their hearing yet, then prevention is the most reasonable strategy. You know, there's the old saying that I'm going to butcher about an ounce of prevention being worth a pound of treatment or something like that. So for people that are either exposed to noise, loud noise regularly due to their job or their military service, or to people taking certain medications, certain antibiotics, or certain chemotherapy drugs, some of those antibiotics, not most, but some, and some chemotherapy drugs do cause hearing loss. And so we're interested in developing treatments that somebody could have at the same time as they're receiving one of these hearing loss causing medications so that they can receive the benefit of the antibiotic or the chemotherapy drug, but not lose their hearing as a side effect.
So what exactly causes these drugs that someone takes? What causes them to lose their hearing?
Yeah, these particular antibiotics, they're called aminoglycoside antibiotics, and they are commonly used for cystic fibrosis patients to treat lung infections, or in sepsis or tuberculosis patients. Are also very commonly used in premature infants and in the developing world because they're cheap and effective. And they enter the inner ear, and then when they're in the bloodstream, these drugs get to the inner ear, they enter the inner ear, and then they're taken up by the sensory cells in the inner ear. These are called hair cells because they have little hair-like things sticking out the top. They look nothing like the hairs that grow out of some people's ears. These are deep in our inner ear, so you can't actually see them in a living person. And these drugs enter these hair cells. These are the sensory cells that we need to detect sound and transmit signals to the brain. And they kill those cells. So over time, patients that receive these drugs don't have as many of these hearing sensory cells left because these drugs have damaged them. And it's the same thing with noise, that loud noise also kills these hearing cells.
So on the regenerative side, what are you trying to do?
So the regenerative side, I think, is fascinating. I think clinically we're further away from being able to regenerate hearing for someone that's already lost it than we are for being able to prevent hearing loss from certain known causes. But I think the regenerative side is really exciting in that we know that fish, frogs, chickens, really everybody but mammals that we've looked at, and we being the community, not just my lab, that we can regenerate hearing. So fish can robustly regenerate their hearing cells and regenerate hearing. Chickens can do the same thing after things like one of these drugs or loud noise, but mammals can't. And so looking at these other vertebrates, and we use zebrafish in my lab, we're trying to understand the genetics of how these fish can robustly regenerate their hearing cells and restore hearing function, and then doing some comparisons between their genetics and genetics in mammalian inner ears, which can't restore hearing cells, can't regenerate, and trying to understand what the key differences are so that we can develop regenerative therapies. And obviously, we're not the only lab that's doing this work, but as a community, I think it's a really exciting area and offers a lot of potential for hearing restoration in the next couple of decades.
So have you learned anything as to why there are differences between these other animals and mammals as to why we don't regenerate hearing?
Yeah, so we know that the cells that surround the hearing cells in fish, so these are called supporting cells. So they're the hair cells. Those are the cells that detect the sound, whether that's in our ears or in fish's ears or in a sensory system in fish called the lateral line. We know that after damage, when those hair cells are dying, then that stimulates these surrounding nearby cells called supporting cells, which for people that are familiar with the nervous system, they're a lot like glial cells. And we know these cells then divide and give rise to new hair cells. And that also some of these supporting cells can directly convert from being one type of cell to another. So they can go from being supporting cells to being hair cells, growing the right sort of cell structures, looking like a hair cell and connecting with the nervous system, the central nervous system. And some of the genes that are important for this process are known, but a lot of them aren't. And so again, it's trying to get a bigger picture of not only what genes are getting turned on or turned off to cause these supporting cells to divide, but not to divide too much, to make new hair cells. But then what are specific differences in some of those proteins that actually lead them to maybe have different functions in our ear versus in a fish's ear?
On average, how many people lose their hearing every year?
Every year, I don't know the exact numbers, and that's a good question. Overall, there are about 10 million Americans with hearing loss, and it's estimated that another 30 million people are at risk for hearing loss, specifically from loud noise. And there are some studies to show that hearing loss is going up in younger populations. I think anecdotally, all you have to do is look around and see the number of teenagers and 20-somethings with their earbuds in, when you can clearly hear the music from across the bus or across the room and know that that's too loud. So a lot of the experts think that we're going to see an increase in the number of people, younger people with hearing loss in the next decade or so because of people's current listening habits. And I don't want to go shaming all of those teenagers or 20-somethings. I was one of those myself and have likely done some hearing damage as well. So I get it. It's just, in retrospect, not the smartest decision.
Yeah, it makes sense. And it sounds like you have some important work to do. And hopefully it will help people.
Thank you. Yeah, we're excited about the work and hoping that it will translate into therapies as well.
That sounds great. So let's talk about Science Talk. How did that idea start and what are some of its goals?
Sure. So Science Talk started informally in, I'd say, mid to late 2015. And it was really a conversation between myself and Janine Castro, who works for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service here in the Portland area. And we met, honestly, we're not even sure how. I'd been in the Portland area for a couple of years, and somehow somebody knew the two of us, said, you guys should talk to each other. And we realized, Janine and I, a few years after we met, that for those of us regionally that were interested in science communication in the Pacific Northwest, that was pretty much how we'd all met, was just anecdotally of one person knowing another person saying, oh, you should connect with so-and-so. which of course is how so much networking happens, and that's great. But we realized that we'd met enough people just in the Pacific Northwest that were interested in science communication and working in that field in some way, writing or teaching workshops or engaging in other outreach avenues, that it made sense to try and bring the regional science communication community together for a conference. So we each emailed a few people that we knew in the Pacific Northwest who are working in science communication and said, hey, we're thinking about organizing a conference. What do you think? And are you interested in helping? And within a week, I think we had 10 people that said, yes, this sounds great, and we want to all help organize. To which we said, well, I guess now we're doing this. Before it was just kind of a nebulous idea. Now we have a team. We need to do something. And that led to our first Science Talk conference in 2017, really, again, with the goal of uniting the science communication community, actually bringing people together to bring community. But in 2017, we were really focused on the Pacific Northwest region. So our first conference was at OMSI in Portland. So that's the Oregon Museum of Science and Industry in January 2017. We thought we might get 100 people. We sold out a month early with 250 and had a waiting list, and said to ourselves, this isn't a one of, this is a first of, and there's really a need for this nationally. So that's when we went from being Science Talk Northwest to Science Talk and incorporated a Science Talk in 2017, got our nonprofit status in 2018. And we had another conference in 2018, which was also a success. And we're now gearing up for our 2019 conference, which is April 4th and 5th back in the Portland area.
That sounds awesome. So what role do you see science communication community playing for science communication?
For the conference or in general for the good of our society?
I was going to ask for in general, but I guess you can also answer in terms of the conference as well.
No, I'd rather answer, I think, in terms of the good of society, because that's really what this is all about. Our organization helps to build that science communication community so that we as practicing scientists and science communicators can help science for the good of society, whether that is, and as science communicators, I think our job is to get kids excited about science, to get adults excited about science, to, yes, to a degree, help people learn scientific information, but it's not really about imparting information. I mean, that's the old school deficit model of science communication, which just says people don't understand enough. There's a hole to fill. And if we tell them, then they'll get it. And suddenly science will be used. And that, as we know, is a bunch of BS. Really, it's about helping people understand why science is exciting, how science is done, some of the limitations of science, but what we do know. So when we think about really big, complex problems in our society, things like climate change, things like antibiotic resistance, things like vaccinations and vaccine safety, things like genetically modified foods, that science and what science can bring is part of that conversation, but not just seen as, oh, those are a bunch of talking heads, but that people know scientists, have relationships with science and with scientists, and are more comfortable bringing in science and the scientific information that we can provide into part of these difficult conversations, recognizing that there are multiple perspectives that we need to consider when as society we're trying to tackle these really big problems.
From your time in doing this, do you see that there are any common things that science communicators need to accomplish some of these goals?
I do. I think there's been a lot of progress in recent years among many people about getting away from this deficit model and actually getting to, as scientists and science communicators, really engaging with people in more diverse ways. So whether that means setting up exhibits at science museums that are more hands-on and interactive, or bringing science festivals to places where people are anyway. So trying not just to reach people that are already interested in science, but trying to go to wherever people are at and bringing science into daily life. So I went to a talk here in Vancouver, Washington a few months ago about geology and terroir. So geology and taste of wine and wine flavors, and how geology and soil and climate all influence the wines that many of us enjoy. And I thought that was a great way of bringing science into something that so many of us care about and can relate to on a personal level. And seeing a lot more of those sorts of programs being developed. So things like science stand-up routines, teaching scientists to be stand-up comedians, so that we can get out and share science with people that aren't necessarily seeking science, but are just looking for entertainment. And if we as scientists can get out of our heads and just connect with people and have fun, I think that goes a long way towards helping science make a difference in society. And I've seen that shift in the last 5 years or so in particular. But I think as a science communication community, what we really need then are conversations with each other to say, here's what's working, here's what's not, or here's an idea I have, who wants to help me develop it, or I've read about or learned about this great program going on somewhere else. I would love to start something in my own community. Where are resources that I can use to do that? So I think really it's that exchange of ideas, best practices, and just support within the community that will help us continue to grow.
That sounds awesome. So it sounds, at least what you're saying, is that our definition of a science communicator has changed from what we thought it was, say, 5 or 10 or even 20 years ago. How would you define a science communicator today?
Ooh, you're going to make me give a definition that is then going to go online, which people can rip apart my definition. So I'm going to go for it with the caveat that any definition, there's always something that belies a definition that will falsify it. And that's, of course, my scientist side speaking. But I think a science communicator is somebody that interacts with members of the public. And by public, I realize that's a very diverse group. So that could be school kids, that could be adults at a bar, that could be policymakers, that could be journalists. So science communicators are those that are interacting with non-scientists in really meaningful, relevant ways to not just impart information, but to convey the excitement of science and, more to the point, the impact of science and why it matters in a way that is meaningful for that specific audience.
Okay, that makes sense. I don't think anyone can take issue with it, but you never know.
Somebody will, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's true. So as far as technology goes, do you do any work in with tech and how it helps or hinders science communication?
Not as much. Personally, I am on Twitter, and I do use Twitter to share information about somewhat what's going on in my own research lab and interesting papers that have come out from others' labs, and definitely use Twitter a lot to share science communication information. I do share some things on Facebook, but that's just with family and friends. And then I do use my professional website for my research lab to talk about the research that we do and try to make it exciting for people. And so each of my lab members also has 1-minute videos out on our website where they're talking about their research and why it matters, and also what they want to do next. So helping my students that work with me use their own communication skills to develop an elevator pitch and showcase their work. So we do some work using technology, but I haven't been nearly as active on Twitter or in blogging, and I'm definitely not on Snapchat and Instagram and some of those things. I think those are great platforms, and I'm excited about how the growth in social media can really help us share science in different ways and to reach more people who are looking for different information. But I haven't done a lot of that yet because sooner or later I need to sleep.
That's true. Social media can be like a huge time suck if you allow it to be. So I guess moderation is the key.
As my great grandmother always said, enough is enough and too much is enough already.
Sounds like good advice.
Yep, moderation in most things. One of my lab members wrote that on the board in the lab.
So what are your future plans for Science Talk? Where would you like to be in the future?
We're really focused on making our annual conference a signature go-to event for the science communication and practitioner community. So that is our main focus over the next 5 years or so, is continuing to grow the conference. This year we tried something different, which we'll find out in April how successful it was, but based on feedback so far, I think it's great. And this is this more unconference model, whereas in 2017 to 2018, our program committee invited the speakers, the keynote speakers, the panelists, and curated the program. For the 2019 conference, we sent out a call for session proposals in August and received over 80 proposals. from individuals or groups who are interested in presenting talks or workshops or panels at the conference. And we then had the community vote on the sessions that they wanted to see at Science Talk. So I think there's a lot more excitement around the program this year because there were so many people that attend the conference that were part of creating the program and that are going to be presenting. And they, of course, all invited their friends and family and colleagues to vote for them. So that really helped us get the word out. In the coming years, I see continuing to work with that model and really trying to expand the reach of our conference and expand not just national attendance, but international attendance as well, and really grow this community. We are also looking to move into some other areas. So we are going to be launching a podcast in conjunction with the conference. We do have a Science Talk blog as well. And we're looking to bring in more guest bloggers and more people there, as well as just to continue to connect with other organizations. There are so many great science communication organizations around the country that are doing different things. And we want to continue partnering with those organizations just so we can grow a national science communication community that is inclusive and diverse and supportive of our science communication goals so that the professional science communicators can really focus on doing their jobs and not just trying to find resources or meet each other.
That sounds like a good plan. I hope it all goes well.
Thank you. So do I. So far, things are looking good. We just opened registration last week for the 2019 conference, and we're excited about the people that are signing up so far and hoping that your listeners and the people that they know will sign up as well. We'd love to see everybody here in Portland in April.
Yeah, I hope a lot of people go to it and it's successful. So as we approach that half-hour mark, is there anything you'd like to say that you didn't get a chance to?
Sure. I'd like to take a second to address potentially grad students, postdocs who are listening to this, as well as their faculty mentors. I hear from so many grad students and postdocs who are so excited about science communication and outreach and engaging the public in really meaningful ways. And so many faculty mentors who think that it takes time away from their students or postdocs' research and that it's a time sink and maybe a waste of time. And I want to call those mentors to task and encourage the grad students and the postdocs to get out there and communicate and develop their skills. The better communicators we are, the more our science matters. And also the better we are in the lab or in the field. We're more focused, we're better writers, we're better able to submit grant proposals because we can really hone in on our message. So I think that these skills are really translatable and that the next generation, the younger generation of scientists is going to be much more open about engaging in communication in all different forms, and that the faculty who kind of came through this old school mentality of you stay in the lab or in the field and you keep your head down and do your work, leave it to someone else to communicate, that mindset is counterproductive and I think is hurting us as scientists. And we really just need to be more inclusive and support, especially our trainees, our students, and our postdocs in pursuing their passion for communication.
I think you're right. We do need to change how we communicate with the public, and people need to hear from scientists more. And mentors should encourage their students to communicate, especially if they want to. So would you like to plug Science Talk before we finish?
Absolutely. Happy to do that. Science Talk 19, Tiffany Center in Portland, Oregon, April 4th and 5th. We have a great lineup of events. We have keynote talks and panels and workshops and discussions and a poster session and a reception. And this is just a great opportunity to connect with other science communicators, learn new skills, learn about new programs and ideas, and walk away energized for everybody's science communication and outreach work that we do in our own communities. So I hope to see everybody in Portland in April.
Well, that's awesome. And thank you for taking the time to talk with me.
Thanks a lot. I appreciate it, David.
And that was Allison Coffin. If you're a science communicator or are interested in becoming one, you should check out Science Talk in April 2019. It looks to be a fun educational event where you can meet and learn from other science communicators. And that concludes our bonus episode of the Science Bloggers podcast. I hope you liked it. We will return in 2019, and I hope you will join us and continue listening.